The memory played again in Captain Elena Rodriguez's neural implant, a curse and a promise etched into her very being. She was 5 years old when the Syndicate first arrived at the Centauri colony, their massive ships casting shadows over what had been humanity's most ambitious settlement beyond Earth. Back then, the alien delegation had seemed like a miracle. The Tripartite Syndicate, a coalition of 3 advanced spacefaring civilizations, had promised protection, trade, and technological exchange. Humanity, still recovering from centuries of internal conflicts and environmental devastation, saw it as a chance at redemption, a way to leap beyond the narrow confines of a single wounded planet. Elena remembered her parents' excitement. Her father, a terraforming engineer, had been selected as part of the initial diplomatic exchange. Her mother, a quantum communications specialist, saw it as humanity's greatest opportunity. They believed in the promise of interstellar cooperation, with a passion that bordered on religious conviction. The attack came without warning. Orbital defense networks went dark in milliseconds. Communication relays burst into silent explosions of electromagnetic interference. The colony's shield generators, cutting-edge technology that had taken decades to develop, failed catastrophically, their quantum encryption unraveled by weapons that seemed to understand their most fundamental architectural weaknesses. In the chaos, 5-year-old Elena was shoved into an emergency containment pod by her mother. The last image burned into her memory was her parents standing back to back, her father's terraforming laser converted into a makeshift weapon, her mother's hands dancing across a communication console, trying to send out a final message. Then, silence. The pod's systems were designed for long-term survival: cryogenic suspension, radiation shielding, self-sustaining nutrient systems. What its designers hadn't anticipated was the psychological impact of total isolation. Elena spent 17 years in that pod, drifting through the cold void of space. Her only companion was a damaged AI system that kept her alive and slowly, meticulously, reconstructed the story of her colony's destruction. When a deep space mining vessel finally discovered her pod, Elena was no longer just a survivor. She was a weapon. Cybernetic implants had grown with her body during those suspended years. The pod's AI had methodically enhanced her, using experimental medical protocols designed for extreme survival scenarios. Her left eye was now a quantum-linked sensor that could process visual information across multiple electromagnetic spectrums. Neural pathways had been rewired, augmented with synthetic connections that allowed her to interface directly with complex computer systems. The mining vessel's crew quickly realized they hadn't rescued a victim. They had found a living record of humanity's greatest tragedy. Intelligence gathering became Elena's obsession. Every scrap of data about the Syndicate, every communication intercept, every fragmentary record became a piece of a massive, intricate puzzle. She wasn't just seeking revenge. She was constructing a comprehensive strategy of total retribution. When Earth's remaining military and scientific leadership learned of her existence, they didn't see a trauma victim. They saw a strategic asset. The sovereign vengeance was constructed around her capabilities, a massive battleship that was part warship, part research platform, part living memorial. Its systems were designed to be an extension of Elena's augmented consciousness. Where traditional military vessels required entire crews to manage complex operations, this ship could be controlled by thought, by intention. Her crew was carefully selected. Each member was a survivor, each with their own story of loss. A communications officer who had lost her entire family in the initial attack. A quantum engineer whose research institute was systematically erased from planetary records. A tactical AI specialist whose groundbreaking work was stolen and weaponized. By the Syndicate, they weren't just a military unit. They were a collected fury, a human response calibrated through decades of pain and preparation. The holographic memorial continued its silent rotation, thousands of faces, each representing a life cut short. Mothers, fathers, children, researchers, colonists. An entire potential future murdered before it could fully emerge. "Status report," Elena commanded, her voice a low, controlled frequency that seemed to resonate through the ship's very molecular structure. Her augmented eye flickered, processing terabytes of incoming data in microseconds. The syndicate believed their massacre was complete. They believed humanity had been reduced to a footnote in galactic history. They were about to learn the true meaning of miscalculation. Dr. Marcus Chen's laboratory was not a conventional scientific space. Suspended within a quantum-shielded chamber that existed simultaneously across multiple dimensional planes, he was more machine than human, a living bridge between biological intelligence and something far more complex. The left side of his skull was a transparent crystalline structure, revealing a neural network that pulsed with bioluminescent data streams, organic neurons intertwined with quantum processors, creating a computational matrix that could process alien communication patterns with impossible speed and depth. His obsession began the moment the Centauri colony fell. As a young researcher, Marcus had been developing breakthrough communication decryption algorithms when the Syndicate's attack occurred. While others saw a massacre, he saw a puzzle, a complex communication network waiting to be understood. The attack wasn't just a military operation. It was a message, and messages could be decoded. The fragment he discovered wasn't an accident. It was a deliberate leak, a microscopic crack in the Syndicate's seemingly impenetrable information firewall. Holographic displays surrounded him, each representing a different layer of intercepted communication. Some were decades old, others mere milliseconds past transmission. To an ordinary observer, they would appear as chaotic light patterns, random noise. To Marcus, they were a living, breathing ecosystem of information. "Helena," he called to the room's quantum AI assistant, "run comparative analysis protocol, Omega-9. The room's ambient temperature dropped 2 degrees. Quantum entanglement relays began spinning complex probability matrices. Each intercepted communication was cross-referenced against millions of historical data points. Alien diplomatic exchanges, military transmissions, even seemingly innocuous cultural broadcasts. What emerged was not a simple intelligence report. It was a comprehensive anatomical diagram of the Syndicate's political body. The 3 primary species that composed the Syndicate were not united. They were held together by a complex web of mutual blackmail, economic dependencies, and carefully maintained illusions of cooperation. The Carlex, a silicon-based species known for their massive computational networks, were being systematically manipulated by the methane-breathing Vortuk tribes. Meanwhile, the energy-based Luminari species operated as a hidden puppet master, their true motivations buried beneath layers of quantum-encrypted communication. Marcus's augmented brain began to construct potential scenarios. Each possibility branched into thousands of potential outcomes, creating a living, dynamic map of potential galactic conflict. The Syndicate's greatest strength was also its fundamental weakness: complexity. They had created such an intricate system of mutual control that a single, precisely applied pressure point could cause total systemic collapse. A notification blinked on his neural display. An encrypted transmission, so deeply buried that it would have been invisible to any other form of intelligence, had been detected. Its origin point was curious: a remote communication relay near the edge of Vortuk territory, supposedly abandoned decades ago. "Helena, initiate quantum decryption," Marcus murmured. The room went silent. Quantum processors began their delicate dance, peeling back layers of encryption that had been considered unbreakable. Most intelligence agencies would require years, if not decades, to crack such a transmission. Marcus did it in 3.7 seconds. The message was not what anyone would expect. It wasn't a military communication or a diplomatic exchange. It was a personal message, fragmented, emotional, revealing deep fissures of discontent within the Syndicate's ruling structures. A Vortuk sub-admiral was communicating with a disgraced Carlex politician. Their conversation revealed systematic oppression, economic manipulation, and a growing resistance movement that had been carefully hidden from external observation. Marcus's augmented eye began constructing probability matrices. If this communication was genuine, and his quantum processors confirmed a 99.9998% likelihood of authenticity, then the syndicate was far more fragile than anyone had imagined. "Captain Rodriguez will want to see this," he said softly. The holographic displays began to reconfigure. What had appeared as chaotic light patterns now formed an intricate web, each connection point representing a potential strategic opportunity. The syndicate thought they had destroyed humanity's future. They were about to learn the true meaning of miscalculation. Helena, the quantum AI, displayed a single line of text that seemed to capture the moment's profound significance. Intelligence is not information. Intelligence is understanding. The laboratory was a cathedral of impossible engineering. Dr. Aisha Okonkwo stood at its center, her body a living interface with technologies that defied conventional understanding. Nanoscale fabrication nodes extended from her fingertips like liquid mercury tendrils, each capable of manipulating matter at the atomic level. Her neural implants created a direct connection between human imagination and technological implementation, a bridge between biological creativity and machine precision. The Prometheus Protocol was more than a weapons system. It was humanity's ultimate response to technological extinction. Each project station represented a different breakthrough that would have been considered impossible mere decades ago. In one corner, adaptive molecular armor underwent stress tests that simulated conditions found in the hearts of dying stars. Another station housed quantum communication arrays that could transmit information faster than light, using principles that would have driven classical physicists to madness. But the true marvel was the central project, a technological ecosystem that could learn, adapt, and evolve in real time. "System diagnostic," Aisha commanded, her voice triggering a cascade of holographic displays. A test drone materialized in the center of the lab. It wasn't a traditional mechanical device, but a living technological organism. Its exterior could shift and adapt, molecules rearranging themselves instantaneously to counter any known form of attack or environmental challenge. The drone's initial configuration mimicked a standard syndicate reconnaissance vessel. Within moments, it transformed, first subtly, then dramatically. Weapon systems materialized where sensor arrays had been. Defensive shields became offensive projection systems. It was less a machine and more a living, thinking weapon that could rewrite its own fundamental nature in microseconds. Aisha's great-grandmother had been a quantum computer pioneer in Nigeria. Her grandmother was an aerospace engineer who watched humanity's first serious attempts at interstellar colonization. Her mother survived the initial syndicate attack. And now, Aisha was completing a generational mission of survival and revenge. "Helena," she called to the quantum AI system, "run adaptive response scenario Omega 0. The lab's environmental conditions began to shift. Radiation levels spiked. Gravitational parameters warped. Electromagnetic interference created chaos that would destroy conventional technological systems. The test drone didn't just survive. It thrived. Each change in environmental condition was met with an instantaneous molecular reconfiguration. Radiation-absorbing metamaterials formed where standard shielding would have failed. Gravitational stress was redistributed through a dynamic molecular matrix that essentially flowed around potential points of structural failure. This was more than engineering. This was biological technological evolution accelerated to its ultimate expression. The Prometheus Protocol had three fundamental principles. Adaptation is survival. Intelligence is the ultimate weapon. 3. Limitation is a choice, not a constraint. Aisha's research went beyond military application. Each breakthrough was a middle finger to the syndicate's belief that humanity could be easily exterminated. Every technological advancement was a statement. We are not just survivors. We are architects of our own destiny. A notification flashed on her neural display. Initial test results showed the adaptive drone could now perfectly mimic the technological signatures of any known syndicate vessel. More than mimicry, it could predict and counter defensive responses before they could be implemented. The drone's final transformation was its most shocking. It didn't just adapt to external conditions. It began to generate its own complex energy signatures, creating a technological camouflage that was indistinguishable from the background quantum noise of space itself. Simulation complete, the quantum AI announced. Isha allowed herself a rare smile. The syndicate believed they had destroyed humanity's future. They were about to learn that humanity's true strength was not in preservation, but in radical, instantaneous reinvention. The test drone dissolved into a cloud of adaptive nanites, each one a potential seed of technological revolution. Outside, the lab's quantum-shielded walls, the sovereign vengeance waited, a ship that was no longer just a vessel of war, but a living embodiment of humanity's technological renaissance. The Prometheus Protocol was ready. Humanity's revenge would be written in the language of impossible innovation. The first strike was a symphony of digital warfare that transcended traditional concepts of combat. Lieutenant Zara Okiki sat at the central communication hub of the Sovereign Vengeance, her neural interfaces humming with anticipation. She wasn't just a communications officer, she was a psychological warfare architect, trained to understand that the most devastating weapons were often invisible. Her family had been among the first wave of colonists on Centauri. The massacre wasn't just a memory, it was a genetic inheritance of pain. Targeting complete, she whispered. Across 500 simultaneous communication channels, the unthinkable began to happen. Every syndicate military and civilian network was suddenly flooded with a single, horrifying transmission. It wasn't a weapon. It was a memory. The final moments of the Centauri colony played out in excruciating detail. Security cameras captured the initial moments of the attack. Civilian research centers erupted in silent explosions. Children's playgrounds became killing zones. Medical facilities collapsed under precision strikes that targeted life support systems with surgical accuracy. Each frame was a testament to calculated, methodical destruction. But this was more than simple replay. The transmission was engineered with quantum-level psychological manipulation technologies, developed in the deepest, most classified human research facilities. Every alien viewer experienced the footage differently. The Carlex, with their silicon-based neural networks, felt the raw data of human suffering as a mathematical probability of extinction. The Vortuk, with their empathic sensory capabilities, were overwhelmed by the emotional resonance of collective trauma. The energy-based Luminari experienced the transmission as a cascading wave of existential disruption. Zara watched the real-time psychological impact across multiple dimensional analysis screens. Military communication channels began to fragment. Internal security protocols collapsed as individual units became overwhelmed by the transmitted memories. It wasn't just information, it was a weaponized emotional experience that bypassed traditional defensive mechanisms. Quantum resonance. At 98.7%, her AI assistant reported. Psychological disruption exceeding projected parameters. The brilliance of the attack was its multi-layered approach. This wasn't just about showing the massacre. It was about forcing the syndicate to experience humanity's pain from multiple perspectives simultaneously. Embedded within the transmission were subtle quantum-encrypted data packets. As the emotional trauma spread, these packets began to infiltrate communication networks, creating microscopic points of systemic vulnerability. Each packet was a potential seed of total network collapse. Captain Elena Rodriguez watched from the bridge, her augmented eye processing the psychological warfare with clinical precision. "They believed they could eliminate us," she said softly. "They didn't understand that survival is more than physical preservation. Survival is memory. Survival is the ability to transform pain into purpose." The syndicate's communication networks began to show first signs of systemic breakdown. Military units started questioning standing orders. Internal communication channels erupted with debates, recriminations, moments of profound moral questioning. A Vortuk fleet commander, midway through a routine patrol, suddenly transmitted an unprecedented message. "What have we become?" The quantum psychological attack was designed with multiple layers of impact. Immediate emotional destabilization, long-term moral questioning, systematic breakdown of hierarchical control structures, introduction of collective guilt as A strategic vulnerability. Zara's neural interfaces began collecting the cascading psychological data. Each moment of emotional breakdown was another victory, not just for revenge but for a fundamental reimagining of interstellar conflict. Secondary infiltration protocols engaging, her AI assistant announced. The next phase was already in motion. As the syndicate's communication network struggled with the emotional assault, microscopic quantum-encrypted viruses began their systematic infiltration. These weren't traditional computer viruses. They were adaptive intelligence packets that could transform based on the psychological state of their host systems. On the bridge, Captain Rodriguez allowed herself the smallest hint of a smile. The syndicate had believed they could eliminate humanity through total destruction. They were about to learn that humanity's true weapon was its ability to transform collective trauma into a force of unimaginable strategic complexity. Psychological warfare engagement. 100% success, Zara reported. The first battle was won, not with weapons, but with memory. Not with destruction, but with the most powerful force in the universe, understanding. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, not to be confused with the ship's captain but her twin sister and the foremost quantum physicist in human history, stood at the epicenter of what would become known as the most significant technological breakthrough in galactic warfare. The Quantum Entanglement Displacement Array, QEDA, was more than a weapon. It was a fundamental reimagining of spatial-temporal interaction. Most species understood faster-than-light travel as a linear progression. Accelerate. Move. Arrive. The human approach was radically different. Why move through space when you could make space move around you? Quantum synchronization at 99.7%, her personal AI assistant announced. The laboratory was a crystalline sphere suspended in a quantum-stabilized pocket dimension. Outside its walls, traditional physics ceased to exist. Inside, Elena Rodriguez was rewriting the fundamental laws of universal interaction. Her body was a living interface with the most complex technological system ever conceived. Quantum processors were integrated directly into her neural pathways, allowing her to conceptualize multidimensional mathematical constructs that would drive traditional mathematicians to madness. The breakthrough came from an unexpected intersection of disciplines: quantum mechanics, psychological warfare, computational biology. Each field was a puzzle piece that, when combined, created something entirely unprecedented. The first test was both terrifying and beautiful. Syndicate monitoring. Stations across 5-star systems suddenly reported an impossible phenomenon. Human ships were appearing simultaneously, not through traditional faster-than-light travel, but by exploiting quantum entanglement in a way no species had ever conceived. Each appearance was a surgical strike of mathematical precision. Communication. Relays collapsed. Central governing nodes disintegrated. Financial networks were reduced to quantum noise. The attacks weren't random. They were a perfectly choreographed dance of technological destruction, each strike calculated to create maximum systemic disruption. They think in linear time, Elena muttered to herself. We think in probability matrices. The quantum entanglement displacement array worked on a principle that defied traditional understanding. Instead of moving ships through space, it created localized quantum tunnels that allowed instantaneous relocation. But this was more than simple teleportation. Each quantum tunnel was a living, adaptive system. It could tune, analyze defensive networks in microseconds 2, predict and counter potential defensive responses 3, modify its own quantum signature to become undetectable 4, leave behind microscopic quantum markers for future strategic analysis A. Vortuk. Fleet Commander watched in horror as his most advanced defensive systems became utterly irrelevant. Ships that should have been impossible to track appeared with mathematical precision, struck with surgical accuracy, and vanished before defensive systems could even register their presence. The psychological impact was as devastating as the physical destruction. The Syndicate's greatest strength had always been its complex, interconnected communication and defense networks. humanity transformed those networks into their greatest vulnerability. Each quantum displacement was not just a military strike, it was a fundamental challenge to the Syndicate's understanding of technological possibility. Quantum synchronization complete, the AI assistant announced. Elena Rodriguez allowed herself a moment of profound satisfaction. This wasn't just revenge. This was a comprehensive demonstration of humanity's technological potential. The quantum tunnels began to collapse, leaving behind only mathematical ghosts, traces of a technological approach so advanced it bordered on the metaphysical. Each collapsed tunnel was a message. We are not just survivors. We are architects of reality itself. On the bridge of the Sovereign Vengeance, Captain Elena Rodriguez watched the tactical displays with a hunter's precision. Her twin sister's technological breakthrough was transforming their revenge from a military operation into a fundamental reimagining of interstellar conflict. Tactical assessment, she commanded. The ship's AI responded with cold, mathematical clarity. Total systemic disruption, 97.3%. Syndicate defensive capabilities, neutralized. Probability of complete strategic collapse, 99.8%. The quantum betrayal was complete. The Syndicate had attempted to erase humanity from existence. They were about to learn that humanity's true power was its ability to transform destruction into unprecedented innovation. Space itself seemed to bend around the human fleet, a living testament to a species that refused to be defined by traditional limitations. Commander Kai Chen stood at the intersection of biology and technology, where human consciousness merged with the most advanced artificial intelligence ever conceived. The Sovereign Vengeance was no longer just a ship. It was a living, thinking organism, an extension of human will that could predict, adapt, and neutralize threats before they could even be conceived. Kai's neural interface was a masterpiece of biological-technological integration. Millions of quantum-linked nanoprobes danced through his nervous system, creating a symbiotic relationship between human intuition and machine precision. His brain could process tactical scenarios across multiple dimensional planes simultaneously, while the ship's AI filled in computational gaps with lightning-speed calculations. Incoming threat matrix, he subvocalized. Holographic displays erupted around him, each representing potential strategic scenarios. But these weren't static projections. They were living, breathing probability matrices that evolved in real time. A Syndicate defensive formation would begin to take shape, and before the alien commanders could complete their strategy, the Sovereign Vengeance had already calculated 17 different counter-approaches. The ship's adaptive AI was the true marvel. Developed through decades of research in quantum computing, neural networking, and evolutionary algorithmic design, the AI was more than a computer system. It was a living intelligence that could learn, adapt, and evolve with each microsecond of interaction. During the initial Syndicate attack, human military systems had been tragically static, predictable, vulnerable. Now, every system was a dynamic, living entity that could reshape itself instantaneously. A Vortuk battle group attempted to establish a defensive perimeter. Before they could complete their formation, the Sovereign Vengeance had already analyzed their communication frequencies, predicted their tactical formations, identified structural weaknesses in their ship designs, generated a counter-strategy that rendered their defense obsolete. Kai watched as entire squadrons of Syndicate ships became tactically irrelevant before their commanders could even issue primary attack commands. "We're not fighting," he muttered. "We're evolving in real time." The ship's adaptive capabilities went beyond traditional combat systems. Defensive shields could reconfigure molecular structures instantaneously. Weapon systems could transform based on predictive threat analysis. Communication arrays could generate quantum-encrypted communication patterns that were indistinguishable from background space radiation. Dr. Aisha Okonkwo's Prometheus protocol had transformed warfare from a linear conflict into a multi-dimensional dance of technological adaptation. A Carlex communication intercept began to take shape on one of the holographic displays. The alien commanders were becoming aware that they were no longer dealing with a conventional enemy. Their communication patterns shifted from strategic planning to pure, unadulterated panic. Total tactical adaptation complete, the ship's AI announced. Kai's augmented vision allowed him to see beyond traditional electromagnetic spectrums. He could observe the quantum-level interactions between the ship's systems, watching as millions of adaptive algorithms danced and reconfigured themselves with each passing microsecond. The Sovereign Vengeance was learning faster than any biological or artificial intelligence in galactic history. Most species approached technology as a tool. Humanity was treating it as a living, evolving organism. Each tactical engagement was not just a battle, it was an opportunity for collective technological evolution. Syndicate defensive systems that had taken centuries to develop became obsolete. Within moments of engagement, weapon frequencies that should have been undetectable were anticipated and neutralized before they could be fully deployed. "We are not a military force," Kai whispered to himself. "We are a collective intelligence." The ship's adaptive capabilities extended beyond combat. Damaged systems could regenerate. Communication networks could self-repair. Even the psychological states of the crew were monitored and balanced by the symbiotic AI system. Captain Elena Rodriguez watched from the command center, her augmented eye processing tactical information at speeds that would drive traditional biological intelligence to break down. "Status report," she commanded. The AI's response was both a tactical assessment and a philosophical statement. Tactical adaptation, complete. Evolutionary potential, unlimited. As the Sovereign Vengeance continued its strategic approach, it became clear that this was more than a military operation. This was a fundamental demonstration of humanity's most powerful weapon, the ability to transform, to adapt, to evolve beyond predetermined limitations. The Syndicate had attempted to destroy humanity's future. They were about to learn that humanity's true strength was its capacity for infinite reinvention. The Syndicate's central command was a massive construct, a space station that defied traditional understanding of engineering. Suspended in the gravitational nexus of 3 star systems, it was a testament to millennia of alien technological achievement. Protected by defensive systems that could vaporize entire planetary formations, it had been considered the most impregnable fortress in known space. Captain Elena Rodriguez was about to prove otherwise. The Sovereign Vengeance approached, not as a traditional warship, but as a living weapon of such complexity that traditional defensive mechanisms became irrelevant. Behind her, the remaining human fleet formed a tactical formation that was less a military arrangement and more a quantum-linked living organism. "Final approach," she subvocalized. Her augmented eye processed information across multiple dimensional planes. Each microsecond contained millennia of strategic calculation. The ship's adaptive AI was no longer just a computer system. It was a collective intelligence that had absorbed the tactical knowledge of every human military engagement. In history, the Syndicate's defensive networks began to activate. Quantum-shielded weapon platforms emerged from hidden dimensional pockets. Energy signatures that could strip planets to their atomic components powered up. Defensive algorithms that had been developed over centuries prepared to engage. They never stood a chance. The Sovereign Vengeance didn't attack. It infiltrated quantum-encrypted information packets, developed by Dr. Elena Rodriguez's team, began to penetrate the station's defensive systems. These weren't traditional viruses or hacking attempts. They were living intelligence matrices that could adapt, learn, and transform in real time. Each defensive system the Syndicate activated became a potential point of vulnerability. Weapon platforms that powered up found their energy signatures immediately mimicked and redirected. Defensive shields began to recognize the infiltration as part of their own systems. Communication networks collapsed as the quantum intelligence began to rewrite their fundamental operational parameters. Total systemic infiltration, the ship's AI announced. Probability of defensive success, 0.03%. The human fleet wasn't destroying the Syndicate's central command. They were systematically dismantling it at the molecular level, transforming its own defensive capabilities into instruments of its destruction. Inside the command station, alien leaders watched in horror as their most sophisticated technologies became weapons turned against them. Communication networks revealed every secret, every betrayal, every hidden manipulation that had held the syndicate together. Kai Chen's adaptive battlefield strategies had transformed warfare from a linear conflict into a multidimensional deconstruction of technological potential. "We are not here to kill," Captain Rodriguez said softly, her voice transmitting across every communication channel. "We are here to reveal." The station's defensive systems began to cannibalize themselves. Weapon platforms turned on each other. Shield generators created interference patterns that stripped away their own protective capabilities. It was a systematic, mathematically precise deconstruction that was almost beautiful in its complexity. Dr. Aisha Okonkwo's Prometheus protocol had created something beyond a weapon. It was a technological solvent that could dissolve the most complex defensive systems by understanding them more completely than they understood themselves. Syndicate leaders watched as their millennia of technological achievement were systematically dismantled not through brute force, but through a form of technological understanding so advanced it bordered on the metaphysical. Complete system integration, the Sovereign Vengeance's AI announced. The final moment was not an explosion, it was a transformation. The entire Syndicate Central Command Station began to reconfigure. Its massive defensive structures became transparent, revealing every hidden system, every secret communication channel, every manipulative strategy that had sustained their galactic dominance. Captain Rodriguez allowed herself the smallest hint of a smile. This was more than revenge. This was a fundamental reset of galactic power dynamics. The human fleet didn't just defeat the Syndicate, they revealed the fundamental lie at the heart of their technological superiority, that true power comes not from defensive capabilities, but from the ability to understand, to adapt, to transform. As the station's systems collapsed, a single transmission went out across all communication channels. Not a declaration of war. Not a threat, simply a statement of profound mathematical clarity. Understanding is the ultimate weapon. The Syndicate's age of dominance had ended. Humanity's true journey was about to begin. The aftermath was not what anyone expected. Humanity stood at the precipice of total galactic dominance, with the power to obliterate every remaining Syndicate world. Instead, they chose something far more radical: transformation. Captain Elena. Rodriguez convened the first Galactic Reconstruction Conference aboard the Sovereign Vengeance, a vessel that was now more than a warship, but a symbol of humanity's evolved approach to interstellar relations. Delegates from the fractured Syndicate races arrived not as conquered enemies, but as participants in a profound experiment of collective survival. The ship's quantum adaptive conference chamber could simultaneously translate not just languages, but emotional and cultural nuances that traditional communication systems could never capture. "We are not here to punish," Elena announced, her augmented eye scanning the room with a precision that was both technological and deeply empathetic. "We are here to understand." The conference hall was a marvel of technological and psychological engineering. Developed by Dr. Marcus Chen's team, the space could dynamically adjust its environmental conditions to reduce psychological barriers. Gravity, atmospheric composition, even subtle electromagnetic fields shifted to create optimal conditions for communication. The Carlex representative, a silicon-based life form that traditionally communicated through complex mathematical algorithms, found itself experiencing human communication in a way that transcended traditional linguistic barriers. The quantum translation systems didn't just convert words. They translated intent, cultural context, emotional subtext. Dr. Aisha Okonkwo presented the first radical proposal, a comprehensive technological exchange program that went beyond traditional colonial models of resource extraction. "Survival is not about dominance," she explained. "It's about collective adaptation." The proposal was breathtaking in its complexity. Instead of demanding reparations or territorial concessions, humanity offered a comprehensive technological rehabilitation program. The Syndicate's most advanced research facilities would be integrated into a new, collaborative galactic research network. But this was more than a simple technology exchange. The human approach recognized that the Syndicate's aggressive expansion was rooted in fundamental survival challenges: resource scarcity, technological limitations, cultural traumas that had been perpetuated across generations. Each alien delegation received a comprehensive analysis, not just of their technological capabilities, but of their species' psychological and evolutionary challenges. Dr. Chen's quantum adaptive analysis systems could map entire civilizational trajectories with unprecedented depth. The Vortuk tribes, who had been the most aggressive military force in the Syndicate, were offered something unprecedented: not subjugation, not punishment, but a path to collective healing. Specialized terraforming technologies developed during humanity's most challenging periods would be shared. Resources from previously uninhabited star systems would be made available. The emphasis was on collective survival rather than individual dominance. "We are not your saviors," Elena Rodriguez explained. "We are your partners in survival." The most shocking element was the complete transparency. Every technological exchange was open-sourced. Every strategic discussion was recorded and made available to all participating species. The quantum communication networks developed by human scientists ensured that no hidden agendas could survive. Kai Chen's adaptive intelligence systems were repurposed. No longer purely military tools, they became instruments of collective problem-solving. Technological challenges that had seemed insurmountable could now be approached through a collaborative, multidimensional perspective. The destroyed Centauri colony would be rebuilt, not as a memorial to suffering, but as a living symbol of collective reconstruction. A research hub where representatives from all participating species could work together. Syndicate leaders who had been responsible for the initial attack were not executed. They were instead integrated into comprehensive rehabilitation and understanding programs. The human approach recognized that true justice was not about punishment, but about fundamental transformation. As the conference concluded, something unprecedented happened. The quantum communication networks began to show something that went beyond diplomatic agreements. Emergent patterns of collective understanding began to form, a living, adaptive network of interspecies communication. "This is not an end," Elena Rodriguez told the assembled delegates. "This is a beginning." The sovereign vengeance transformed from a weapon of war to a beacon of collective potential. Its quantum adaptive systems continued to process the complex interactions, creating real-time models of potential collaborative futures. Humanity had arrived seeking revenge. They were leaving having redefined the very concept of galactic civilization. The final transmission from the conference was not a diplomatic document. It was a mathematical representation of collective potential, a blueprint for a future where survival was not about dominance, but about understanding. A future where the greatest weapon was not technological superiority, but the capacity for collective transformation.